Hello everybody, my name is Shortline819. Welcome back to episode 15 of Shortline's Rail News and Comment, and today we will be discussing some explosive news. Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific are in talks about a merger. This was initially reported by the Wall Street Journal, but has subsequently been confirmed by other outlets. The Associated Press reported the talks began early this year and are still ongoing. It should be stressed that these are just preliminary talks. No actual merger agreement has been signed, nor has any merger application been sent to the Surface Transportation Board. This could fizzle out, or it could be the start of something much bigger. There has been talk of possible Class 1 mergers for a few months now. It was always speculated that Union Pacific would be the one to initiate such a merger, after their CEO, Jim Vena, told Trains magazine that such mergers would be beneficial. If such a merger gets approval, it would be the first Class 1 merger since CPKC. It would also be the first truly transcontinental railroad company in the United States. The way railroads are currently structured in the United States is as follows. You have two railroads in the west, Union Pacific and BNSF, and two railroads in the east, CSX and Norfolk Southern. With few exceptions, these railroads are divided at a line running from Chicago to New Orleans. It's basically two regional duopolies, with the Canadian railroads also running down the middle. If UP-NS does go ahead, you would naturally get BNSF-CSX as a counter-merger, forming two national duopolies, although concessions granted to the Canadian railroads might weaken said duopolies. More on that later. Now, before I go further, I'm going to go over a brief timeline of events for the past couple of months. So on May 12th, Trains magazine reported that several Class 1s were looking a fresh look at mergers, with Union Pacific CEO Jim Vena establishing his view that a transcontinental Class 1 merger would be beneficial. This was followed on May 21st, also in Trains magazine, which reported the views of several Class 1 CEOs concerning mergers. Vena once again voiced his support, with CN, CPKC, and BNSF being either very skeptical or very dismissive. CSX and NS, however, were more receptive, leading to the conclusion that they were potential acquisition targets of Union Pacific. On July 9th, STB board member Karen Hedlund addressed concerns that the board would not be ready to handle a Class 1 merger scenario, saying it is ready. Bring it, she said. On that same day, Trains magazine also reported the results of a TD Cowen shipper survey, which stated that 53% of shippers would not support a merger, and 39% of shippers would support a merger if concessions were made to them. An unprecedented 47% of shippers said they would support a merger. And the big news, on July 17th, Trains magazine reported that Morgan Stanley was advising Union Pacific on a potential merger, with the Wall Street Journal reporting later in the day that Union Pacific was in active talks with Norfolk Southern, which was promptly reported by other outlets. Now, from the standpoint of the railroads involved, why would such a merger be beneficial? The main point to understand here is that railroads are a network business. If you don't go somewhere, more often than not, you're out of luck. We aren't building new railroads, so you can only buy them. A bigger network grants you more opportunities, more business, including that which is currently undertapped. For example, watershed traffic. This is traffic that crosses the dividing line I mentioned earlier, say Indianapolis to Omaha or Houston to Columbus. Because of the dividing line, this is a short haul for the two railroads involved. The business incentives, cost structures, and general mentality of the Class 1s makes going after this traffic undesirable to them. Because of this, trucks typically dominate in this region. If you merge, the two short hauls become one long haul, thus becoming more attractive to the Class 1s. There's also the fact that because of this divide, a shipment between the east and the west coasts often has to stop in, say, St. Louis for days in order to change railroad. Trucks don't have this issue, making rail less attractive. Another really big reason, in fact probably the main reason for all of this, is frankly Wall Street. The railroads have basically milked whatever they can out of the precision scheduled railroading well at this point, and need some way to satiate their shareholders' desire for ever higher profits and stock price. A cynic would probably say that they just need a new gimmick at this point. Merging is a pretty easy way of doing all of that, if they're approved, of course. But it also could spectacularly backfire if the merger is denied. Look no further than SPSF for how that can turn out. Now, the big question on everyone's minds is, would such a merger receive approval from the Surface Transportation Board? That answer is very murky at the moment, and there are many factors to consider, so I'm going to go over them and let you ultimately decide. One of the reasons why Union Pacific might be trying a merger now is the makeup of the STB. It is normally comprised of 5 members, all with the power to vote on cases that are brought before the board. One member is the chairman, although it is currently vacant. The rest of the board is currently split between 2 Republican-appointed members and 2 Democrat-appointed members. The fact that a new Republican chairman might be appointed, combined with the business-friendly and anti-regulation attitude of the current presidential administration, might lead railroad executives to think that a merger is more likely to be approved than not. The current Class 1 merger application rules is yet another factor. A bit of history. The current rules date from 2001. That year, BNSF and Canadian National attempted to merge and form the creatively named North American Railways, which would have been led by Hunter Harrison of all people. The other railroads, along with most of the nation's shippers, greatly opposed the merger, Union Pacific chief among them. They flexed their political muscle and got a 15-month moratorium put in place while they rewrote the rules to be stricter. All future mergers would be judged under these rules. The one exception would be any merger involving Kansas City Southern, which is how we got CPKC. It should be noted that despite various attempts such as BNSFCN, CSXCP, and NSCP, no actual merger application was ever filed with the STB in those cases. They never got to that point, which means that these rules remain very much untested. What makes these rules so strict? Well, the main aspect is the clause that any merger must not only preserve existing competition, but expand it. This is generally interpreted to mean reciprocal switching, allowing other railroads to serve industries on the merged system would have to be implemented. This also might mean that a merged UP-NS would have to grant trackage rights or other lines to competing railroads. As for what lines might go, either the NS x Wabash or UP x Mopac between Kansas City and St. Louis would have to be sold to another railroad, quite possibly CN, because they are directly parallel. Things might not stop there, as Canadian railroads might get access to markets only previously served by American railroads under the guise of expanding competition. Now, mergers are fundamentally an exercise in politics, so if a merger does go ahead, the parties will have to present a damn good political case before the STB and the public. Lack of political support was a consistent problem with previous recent Class 1 merger attempts, especially those attempted by Hunter Harrison. They lacked political support because they did not grasp this simple rule and died as a result. Remember, CNKCS had more shipper support than CPKC, but CPKC ultimately happened because they played the political game in Washington better. Because of this fact, I actually believe such a merger could be a boon for Amtrak and transit agencies, since they could easily wrestle away concessions they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Such concessions could go a long way towards satisfying politicians, since they can take home something tangible back to many of their constituents. Also expect various environmental concessions to be granted. There is also labor. Labor has been rather iffy on the subject of mergers in the past. Smart, for example, already came out against any kind of merger months ago. However, some labor groups have supported mergers in the past. If railroads are willing to grant concessions along with a promise to hire more labor or traffic grows, then they might be able to win over some labor to their side. However, it should be said that it is also likely that any such merger could also result in job loss. Considering the end-to-end nature of any merger, plus potential job losses could come from the consolidation of maintenance departments and locomotive shops, rather than, say, train and engine crews. In this case, expect labor to vigorously oppose any merger. I would have expected the biggest opposition to come from railroad shippers themselves, as they have historically opposed further consolidation. However, going back to that T.D. Cohen survey, 47% of shippers said they would support such a merger, a genuinely surprising number to me. 53% of shippers would oppose merger, however, 39% would support merger if concessions were granted to them. Shippers' primary concerns would probably be the pricing power that any such duopoly would hold, combined with the possibility for service meltdowns as a result of the merger, albeit the merged railroad does have to submit a service implementation plan in order to get approval. The memory of Union Pacific utterly fucking up their mergers with the Chicago Northwestern and Southern Pacific due to their own arrogance is still somewhat fresh. Now, it is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. As I said, it could fizzle out, it could be the start of something big, and it will almost certainly take plenty of twists and turns we don't expect. But that's all for today. I would like to thank Jimmy Lambert, Arkansas Locomotive Works, and the Game Player for the footage and some of the pictures used. Also shout out to 2026 Productions for making the thumbnail for me. Thank you. Please go check them out. Sources are linked below, as along with any other miscellaneous footage and pictures that I use. So what do you think? I'm sure this will be not controversial in the slightest. Yeah, so I will hopefully try and be here for this. But I'll see you all in the next one, and goodbye everybody.